Welcome to the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast on YouTube. To today's episode in just a minute, but first I want to tell you about the Art of Leadership Academy and Compassion, today's sponsor. So the Art of Leadership Academy is over 1,300 leaders who want to be in your corner, including me. I lead it, and I want you to imagine breaking your next personal growth barrier or church growth barrier. That's what happens every day in the Art of Leadership Academy. You can check it out at theartofleadershipacademy.com. And today's episode is brought to you by Compassion, one of my favorite organizations because they help release children from poverty in Jesus' name. And best of all, they use the local church around the world to do it. Actually, at the end of today's video, today's podcast, you can learn more about what Compassion does. But in the meantime, check them out at compassion.com/CNLP. And now to today's episode. Well, Chad, welcome to the podcast. It's been a long time coming.
Thanks so much for having me on. Thanks for the patience to make it happen.
Yeah, well, it really works out. So we I'm curious always about the timing of when we get together. And we've talked about this, I think, our teams for about a year. But we've kind of, I thought we'd be through it by now, but we're not. We've all been through this collective slump over the last few years. And everyone thinks, oh, hope's right around the corner and everything's going to be fantastic. And it's been super challenging. I want to start here. How has it hit you and your church? And how are you handling that?
Well, hit is the right word. It has hit us. And might I add, over and over again. I think, you nailed it already in your question. Every time you think there's hope around the corner, it's like there's another obstacle and there's another layer or dynamic. And recently I was interviewing Craig about COVID and the realities of trying to come out of it. And he was saying he thinks that right now is the hardest time in all of COVID for leadership. And I when he said that, I just resonated. I go, yeah, we're finding it's the hardest time now. With all of the dynamics of the after effect, the Great Resignation, the political unrest, just so on and so forth, especially when it comes to our world as far as church attendance, church engagement, volunteer culture, all of it is really an obstacle that we didn't face, I felt, in 2019. And so it has hit us. We, in LA here, we didn't meet on a Sunday morning for 17 months.
Oh, wow.
And so when you open back up, you're opening with a church. Now, for us here in California, especially LA, there was a mass exodus. So you're facing an exodus. You're facing people that don't want to come back. There's a mask reality. You said too much about racism in June. You didn't say enough. There's just a lot of different. Of course, I'm preaching the choir here with you and the information you gave us as a leadership group. But as it pertains to us here in LA, it really has affected us more than I thought it would, and it continues to. But I think that I'm naive enough to believe hope's around the corner. It's going to get better today. I think you have to have that spirit and that attitude to be a leader, to be honest.
Yeah, if there's no hope, let's all just go home, right? Exactly. What's the point? I don't know. Apparently, I heard this from Sharon Hottie Miller, but apparently it goes back to John Tyson. But he talked about the challenge. So I'm getting this third hand. So if I'm totally wrong, John, my apologies. Please text me and correct me. But I thought it was a really incisive point. He said, one of the challenges a lot of leaders have had is volunteers aren't coming back. And he linked it to perhaps over delineating boundaries. So one of the ways I'm thinking of the last 2 years is I'm thinking of it in terms of the Great Reset. We talk about the Great Migration, which happened. Everybody left town. Hundreds of thousands of people left California, went to Texas, went to Florida, went to Arizona and beyond. But also people moved from LA to the mountains, or they moved to the desert, or they moved somewhere else, right? And then you've got all these volunteers coming back going, well, I'm rethinking everything, working from home. And so I'm not sure I'm in every Sunday for 5 hours anymore. And he said, we've almost over delineated, if I've got this third hand quote from John Tyson right, our boundaries. And I thought that was a really interesting way of framing it. What are you learning about re-engaging people at this stage?
Yeah, I think that we are re-engaging a little bit more cautious, more hesitant, more understanding. I think maybe before we were a little bit more cutthroat and there was a lack of sensitivity to schedule, to outside demands. I think I just got out of a meeting right now with our staff, and we were looking at our average monthly volunteer number versus our average weekly volunteer number. And week to week, it doesn't look that massive. But if you look at everybody over a month, it is a large amount of people. And what that tells me, to your point, is that there's some people are just going to go, I'm there once a month. Or I'm there. People that were pretty hardcore before might give you 2 Sundays a month. And that's great. So I think we've got to just adjust our expectations. And it's amazing how strong shame culture can work in church. I think that we try and shame people into serving and shame people into, doing a better job. And if you're not here all day, if you're not here for 5 hours or not here every Sunday, shame on you. And I think we've just adjusted the attitude of that whole thing. And maybe we got away with that before, wrongfully so. Now we're going, hey, whatever you can do is awesome. And we're really thankful that you would give anytime.
That's a really perceptive way of thinking it. I hadn't thought about it. And again, I'm not in the weeds right now like you are, leading a local church day to day, but looking at the monthly volume versus the weekly. Because I know, like, when I started in ministry in the mid-90s, I mean, if you had, let's say, 100 people in attendance, just to pick a number in the air, you might have 120 people that called your church home. And, the Veachas weren't there because they were away this weekend or somebody was sick. But you kind of knew that. Or pick 1,000. It's an easier number. 1,000 people. You might have 1,200 people. It's like, yeah, we haven't seen these guys for a few weeks. By the time I was done day-to-day ministry in 2015, you needed 4,000 people to be totally affiliated with your church to generate 1,200 in attendance on the weekend. Do you know what I mean? Like that average, whatever you call it, math is my strong suit. Yes. That ratio just kept going up and up and up. And I wonder if that's a really interesting way. Like, let's say you need 100 volunteers to run things on the weekend. That might mean you need 400 total volunteers now.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's about that. Yeah. So that bigger number, that monthly number, is a really encouraging number. If you only look at the week to week, then you get really discouraged. One of the lines I stole from you, I think, is so good. And I've told this to a number of pastors, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misquoting you here, but any pastor that focuses just on attendance moving forward is not going to make it. But if you focus on engagement, to me, that really helped me shift as far as I just thought that was good language. Hey, we're focused on engagement. So look at how many people are serving a month. That's great engagement.
Mm-hmm. They're voting.
Look at how many
and that vote probably counts more than it did 5 years ago. Right?
That's exactly right. Or even like giving units. Oh man, the giving units is far is surpassing what it has ever been. So that tells me there's a lot of people that are watching online that aren't in person, because the giving units to in-person attendance ratio, it would be off the charts if it was real, but it's not. It's coming from online.
So this is okay. If you're willing to go there, I'm willing to go there, because I think this is a really practical discussion from somebody who's not an academic, but like, guess where you're going to be on Sunday? You're going to be at your church, right? So this is a real conversation, leading it. So let's think about what is causing people to re-engage. So as your volunteers have stepped up, because we were shut down about the same amount, about 18 months. And, everybody at that point has to re-engage. You've got to check the box and say, I'm back. What have been some things that have worked in re-engaging volunteers? And then what have been some dead ends for you, if any?
I'll tell you about a dead end. We had a worship night for the volunteers kind of early on. And it was one of the worst attended things we've ever done. And I was shocked. Because you think, oh man, these guys, they want to be in the presence of God. They want to worship. They want to be there. They want to be in the presence. And they were kind of going, no, we are not interested in that right now. We love effective email communication. We love a Zoom meeting with our team leads or, all of the volunteers. I think that because everyone was conditioned to be on Zoom and on email, we try to capitalize on meet people where they are right now. And so I think just trying to meet people where they are, both in a digital space, but then also being sensitive to the in-person space and not trying to be in a rush. I think at first I wanted to rush everybody to be back. And then I realized by their behavior, oh, that's going to be the wrong move. And so let's keep it digital. Let's do volunteer meetings on Zoom. Let's get all the team leads on Zoom. And we haven't really deviated from that. This morning, this started out of COVID. Think about this. In COVID, I wanted to meet with our kingdom builders. And so we emailed our top, whatever givers. Wednesday morning, 8:30 in the morning, meet us on this call. So first time we did it, let's say 40, 50 people showed up. Well, if you would have told me in person that I get 40 or 50 of our top givers together, that would have been outrageous.
Yeah.
Well, we said, hey, we're going to do it in not every other week. We're going to do this not next Wednesday, but the Wednesday after. We've been doing that. I did it this morning at 8:30 in the morning, and 30-something people show up, and we give them a full rundown of where we're at financially. I give them a 5 to 7 minute encouragement. I tell them what to pray for, what's coming up on the calendar. I have somebody else kind of talk for a little bit. We've been doing that since COVID started. So in other words, what I'm saying is we just try to meet people where they're at and not deviate from that.
Okay, that's really interesting because I think you're doing the opposite of what most church leaders I know did, which is everybody back in the building, everybody back in the building. But you're right. I mean, you can read the Wall Street Journal or New York Times or whatever, and you should see the fight going on right now in downtown cores of people who don't want to go back to the office. It's like, I'm not going back to the office, and employers and employees are struggling over that. Mostly, for white collar workers, if you drive a truck, you have to kind of be in the truck. But, for people who work in those fields, it's really interesting. Here's another question that I didn't send you in advance, but since we're there, I thought it'd be fun to ask. Do you think there's a fundamental problem with the weekend service? Is it something that needs to be reimagined in light of the fact that so much of life has moved online? Is there enough of a carrot in front of the stick to draw people back on the weekends?
Obviously I'm somebody that, holds 3 in-person services a weekend. So I have to believe that there's something about being in the room.
Yeah.
However, and I'm a church person, a church guy. I love church. I love being in the room. I love, a corporate worship setting. I love community. I think that the relational community aspect is just important as the service. So there's so many dynamics. Our kids ministry. I love all of it. I will say that there is such a large opportunity to reach people digitally. Now, do we need to reimagine our approach to reaching a lost world? Now, that goes without saying. And, to steal another Craig line, to reach people nobody's reaching, we got to do things that nobody's doing. So if we just keep running the same play, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So I do think that we need to reimagine, and we do need to put resource into not just our in-person meeting. I think, one of my best friends, and I think one of the great church leaders, especially in the digital space, Judah Smith, who has an insane in-person church in Seattle and has really pivoted to, church home app and meeting people at home. One of his lines, I'm hoping I'm not misquoting here, but he said something to the effect of, we spend millions to reach thousands instead of spending thousands to reach millions. And there's something there that I resonate with of going, yeah, we got to be careful that when it says we just bought a building, our first building, and we're going to spend a lot of money on a renovation and this millions and millions of dollars. I hope that I wouldn't just focus on the in-person meeting alone, but also how do we redeem that space to send a bat signal out, so to speak, to also reimagine how can we reach people around the world. So I think, you said it. Anybody that focuses on attendance is going to miss out, but focus on engagement. So I think that needs to be our focus, and we need to continually creatively innovate how we see ecclesia. What is the community in the digital space? Because I don't like it when people say, well, if it's online, it's not real. There's a lot of things going on online that are very real, man. And I think you got to wake up. If that's your saying, you're missing. There's a lot of community happening online. So to a long answer to your question, I think it's and both. It's never one or the other to me. It's and both.
What are you doing online that might be, or elsewhere in your church, that you might these days consider innovative? Stuff you wouldn't have imagined doing. You mentioned the gathering the top donors together at 8:30 in the morning and doing a Zoom with them. What else are you doing to really fuel engagement at your church?
I think, I would love to just continue to plagiarize. What is the saying? God gave you eyes, plagiarize. So I'm just trying to steal the best practices of people that are doing, really well. So we get on calls at Elevation Church and try and find out what they're doing. We get on calls with, obviously Life Church. And I think VU does an amazing job in Miami, Rich Wilkerson Jr. And so we're just trying to steal other plays. For example, during 21 days of prayer and fasting, we go live every morning at 7:30 and try and get our church praying together for 21 days. Now here in LA, to get everybody together every morning, if I was in Birmingham, I think I could get a physical in-person meeting. In LA, it's just kind of been a bigger hurdle. So we're trying to have a digital moment online for the church, and we see massive turnouts. Now, I'm a parent of 4, and I don't host these prayer meetings. So as this prayer meeting is going on, my phone is on my kitchen counter. We're making the breakfast. We're making the lunches. We're getting them out the door. They're in the car. My kids are in the prayer meeting with me. Now, does that not count? No, my kids are hearing the word of God, encouragement, prayer themes. They're hearing from different voices in the church. They're getting a thought on the emphasis of the day. So I just think we got to, again, meet people where they're at. I'm a parent. My church met me where I'm at.
Yeah, you're still, if correct me if I'm wrong, but you're still going live on Instagram semi-regularly, are you not?
Absolutely.
You will, because you remember in 2020, my whole, that top bar where stories normally are, if someone goes live, but that top bar was lit up every night at 8:00. It's like everybody and their grandmother is going live on Instagram. And now there's a handful of people who are still doing that, but you're one of them.
Yeah, and I think it's just an opportunity. Again, technology to me is nebulous. It's all about whose hands it's in. So I have the opportunity. Are you kidding me? To go live, and me and you could go live and speak to leaders. I mean, what an opportunity to not, let's say you're marketing something. It's not just a sales opportunity. To me, there's a spiritual side of it. There's a prayer, encouragement, exhortation opportunity that's there for you 24/7 as well. So I think you got to take advantage of the resources that God's given you, and you get better. You learn through failure. I'll never forget. I was telling you before we started, but my father was a district supervisor, in that time when COVID started, and he was trying to help all of his guys go live. And, small church planners or guys that, might not have the resources. And he sent me a meme. Did you see that meme circulating when COVID first started? Like pastors trying to go live from like a Al Qaeda cave or something. Like it was like this
That's funny.
Guys didn't know how to use Facebook, or every church had to go live quickly and learn how to do that. And I think technology, my encouragement to people is don't be intimidated by it. Fail forward, learn, try and get better. Try and get really good at talking to a camera with a certain cadence and a certain rhythm, and maybe you'll be as good as Andy Stanley one day.
How have you learned to do that? Because you've a lot of the people you've mentioned, your friends, your circle, they have significant online presences, and you've cultivated your own. So talk about your sort of digital journey and some of the inflection points along the way, Chad.
Yeah, I think that, what's the worst thing for any communicator to do is listen to themselves. But I have found through failure, you cannot be a good communicator without listening to yourself. And my biggest hiccup has been in a digital space. I preached to young people for 15 years. Now, when you talk to youth, there is a panic in the back of your mind. There is an alarm going off saying, you better entertain or you're going to lose your crowd. And if you lose that crowd, you're not getting them back. And so I've had to, over the last, 10 years or so, try to slow down, try to have more dynamics, more pause. If I want to build, then know how to build. And I think that, you've got to learn how to do that through watching yourself, listening to yourself, and especially, talking to a camera is knowing on the other side, there is a family sitting on a couch and you are on a 65-inch screen. You can't hear them laugh, but they're laughing. And you can't hear them say amen, but they're amening. And so just knowing what you're saying is effective and good. To me, the whole thing about communication is always like, listen, if I think it's good, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. If I walk off the stage and my wife's like, that was awesome. And I'm like, no, it wasn't. Then it wasn't good. And so I think you've got to just be confident and comfortable in your own skin. Another thought, real fast on communication is if people hate your communication, that is a good sign. Because I think there's a whole other side that loves it. So I'll never forget, I had a friend that preached at Passion years ago. And on Twitter, some people were like, blah, 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 and this, that, and the other, and really didn't enjoy the communication style. And I said, that's okay. If that group doesn't like, or that small little camp doesn't like your communication, that's only a signal that there's a whole nother side of people that go, I love the way you talk. So even when you know that there's a group that loves the way that you talk, just know there's going to be a whole other side that does not enjoy the way you talk.
That is really interesting advice, because I think all of us want to be popular with everybody. But I want to go back before I carry on with that thought to what you said, that you talk to, lots of young people, young adults, teenagers. And what you're learning is that you have to slow down, not speed up. A lot of people I would have naturally gone in the opposite direction. I tend to talk to people like you, leaders, but tell me why slowing down has become more effective at connecting with the next generation.
I think guys that I really enjoy their cadence, but also, I think that you should sound like the way you want to sound. So this is a personal preference issue. Now, I'm not saying fast communicators are bad. I'm just saying at my age, I'm 42 years old, I'm trying to slow down because that's just the preference. That's the style I'm going for right now. I think a great cadence so Joel Osteen, let's just look at the numbers. Joel, they say, preaches to 21 million people a week. So there's a digestibility. There's a reason why you walk into a bar and after the game, it's Joel, or just it's across the world. Listen to his cadence, the BPM. It's like, how pop music, just right away, your ear, it's pleasing to the ear. I think if you go too fast and too hard, people are like, oh, slow down. So I think I've just tried to, reinvent. It's amazing. Years ago, Jensen Franklin told me a great story. He, of course, in our world, he's like he's the Prince of Preachers. Imagine your nickname being the Prince of Preachers. Okay. So that's who we're talking about here, is the Prince of Preachers. I said, if you were to go back and change anything about your preaching, what would you have changed? Is there anything? You're the Prince of Preachers. And he said, if I go back and change anything, I would have added to my ability the practice of sitting on a stool or teaching or talking quieter. He said, when people brought Jensen Franklin in to preach, they expected Jensen Franklin. But I wish that I would have also exemplified that I can do leadership, I can talk, I can teach. It's like a pitcher. He was using an analogy as a pitcher. If you only got a fastball, you got to throw it every time. But I wish it would have had a slider or a knuckleball. And I like that. I think that an effective communicator, like a Bishop Jakes, some of my favorite Bishop Jakes content is him sitting down on a couch with Stephen Furtick just talking. And if you're a good communicator, it means I think you can do all of it.
So your platform has grown on Instagram. You've got 300,000 followers plus, and on other platforms as well. And thanks for being willing to go there. But I want to talk a little bit about celebrity preachers. There's been a lot of conversation about that over the last few years. And I'm curious what your thoughts are, being one of those celebrity preachers, on this whole phenomena we've seen. And it's not unique to this generation, but it's probably social media has amplified that. What are some initial thoughts you have, Chad, on the whole idea of celebrity preachers and perhaps even being considered one yourself?
Well, I think it's just such an interesting title, isn't it? Just right away when you say it, doesn't it sound so crunchy? It does
sound weird coming out of my mouth.
So off-putting. It's like these two things should not exist together. Like, I just think it's such, it feels wrong. It feels dirty right away. Because what is a pastor? A shepherd, a servant. What did God say in Jeremiah? I will give you shepherds who will feed you on knowledge and understanding. So what is your job? Your job is to serve. So I understand that where it comes from. If you are a pastor and you have had the opportunity to be in the wake or the space or have the ability to pastor celebrities, I understand how that gets coupled together. I'm okay. Listen, my biggest beef with this is just please don't ever try and be a celebrity pastor. Like, if you're going for that, if you're going for celebrity, something is clinically wrong with you. Like, I'm okay if it just lands in your lap and it's like I was a youth pastor for 15 years in 10 of it was in Seattle. And I loved to pastor high school students. So I'll never forget going to cafeterias and, somehow you're drawn to the ASB president or the captain of the football team or the basketball guy. And I'm okay with you reaching influential people. I think everybody does. To me, it's such a God-given grace. Think about Paul. Paul says, I can't boast about the measure outside of the sphere God's given me. But what God's given is supernatural. I didn't earn it. I didn't deserve it. God's given me a grace. He's given me an influence. This is my this is my sphere. And it's so sovereign. And I think that I'm okay with that. I'm not okay if you going like, I want to be close to celebrities. I want to be famous. Pastor and famous don't go to, it's not our aim. We're called to serve. So I think another thought with this is that you got to pastor where you are. So there's not a lot of celebrities in Iowa or Montana. There's not a lot of celebrities hanging around, Delaware. But if you're going to be in LA, guess who's coming to your church, or New York, or some of these major market cities. So I think you got to pastor where you are, and you got to pastor who God sends you and who shows up at your door. And I think that when I think about the term celebrity pastor, it also makes me think of, are you there to receive? Or are you there to give? Like, I always love John Maxwell. John Maxwell's, his whole thing is like, all you're called to do is add value. Just add value. And if you keep adding value to others, I think crazy doors are going to open up for you to be with principals to presidents, fill in the blank, for you to add value to people. And so I think I really respect people that put their head down, serve, and just walk through the doors God's supernaturally open for you to be a voice and a witness and an influence and a servant there. And if God opened that for you, serve there. Love there, give there, help there, pray there, be strong there. But don't try and knock down that door to be known. I think some have gotten exposed for that. And that is a tough fall.
Mm. Well, it's interesting because at 42, you're of the age where you had a pre-digital ministry, so to speak, right? Where social media wasn't what it is today. And we were comparing notes before we hit record. I think it was about 7 or 8 years ago. I was on a compassion trip to Guatemala. Brad Lomenick put it together with Rich Wilkerson. And I don't even think it was Veach Church. I think he was still at his dad's church at the time, running the youth department. Starting right after
Rendezvous.
Rendezvous. That's right. It was Rendezvous. Bingo, bingo, bingo. And, I could tell, like, that guy is super charismatic. Like, you could see it when you're on a bus with 8 people. Like, Rich is quite the tour de force. But it was one of those things where, I'd love for you to narrate sort of what happened in your journey as you rose with Rich and with Chris Durso and with Carl Lentz and with other people. It was sort of there was a pack of you that kind of rose up together over the last decade. And like, what was that journey like? How did it happen? What did it feel like from the inside? What was that like?
Wow. Just even as you're saying it just brings back a lot of old memories and really fun times. I thought it was just such a unexpected, incredible, fun time. Like, again, like you're saying, I started before a digital age, and never once did I ever pray, God, I want to go preach at another conference, or Lord, I'd love to get on planes, or I'd love to meet. I'll never forget the first book. This is a true story. The first book I ever wrote, how to store books in your garage, self-publish your books. So I self-published my first book, and it was a book to young people called "Do You See What I See?" And we had so many kids graduating high school and they're going off to college. I wanted to write them something they could have in their dorm. And so I put out this book, and another pastor calls me and he said, "Bro, I just saw your book. Thank you for sending me a book." He said, "Do you know that Pastor Brian has a book called The Church That I See?" He's like, "Your title is so close to his." I go, "Oh, bro." Quote, "I will never meet Brian Houston in my lifetime." I mean, that's where I was at.
Yeah.
So when I think about, where that group went, and it was I would really, now I can look and go, wow, you're so blessed by association. And a rich line that I think is so true is your alignment determines your assignment. Who you align your life to changed the trajectory of my life, who I hitched my wagon to. And I was blessed by association for many years. And then in the last couple of years, guilty by association. So I think you got to be careful with your association, because you're going to be blessed if they're crushing and doing right, and you're going to be guilty if they're not. So I had it was a fun time. It was an amazing experience. It took me places I never would have dreamt. I met people I never would have, clearly, Pastor Brian, never would have imagined. And it's completely changed our lives.
Yeah. And so there's a couple of directions I want to go, but obviously it wasn't all what it seemed. There was some serious, just sadness and mistakes, and mistakes made along the way as well. When you look back on that, where were the cracks? If you could get some of those moments back, I'm just curious.
I think, my Peloton instructor says, "No ego, amigo." And I think it's always the downfall. Pride is that killer. Ego is that killer. My dad used to say, you can't read your own press clippings. I think there's, what is the old saying? Your gifting will get you in the door, but character will keep you there. I think, there's cracks. It's always character cracks, and character cracks usually start to crack off pride, off ego, that spirit, and something we all battle with. We all battle with ego. We all battle with pride. That's just part of humanity. And I think that's why you do need major spiritual disciplines in your life. I think that's why you do need accountability. You do need to submit your life to a board of elders or your pastor. And I think when that stuff gets bypassed, we are in some dangerous waters. And I think that's what we learned was when those practices are not in place, you just go down a slippery slope. And again, I'm quoting my dad here, but like we were just talking, my father-in-law just passed the baton to his church last Sunday. My wife's dad pioneered a church 25 years ago. He could go for another 10 to 15, but he's given it to a young guy while he's still healthy. He's now, he's really big in MFI. And so he'll travel the world and preach and train leaders. And so I was at his retirement service and my father's retirement service this last year. They both ended well. So I had a front row seat to see it end well. No asterisk, no like whoopsies, hiccups, like faithful. And both services beautiful. And my dad and I were leaving my father-in-law's service and we were joking about, how many guys I wish could have had this. And he said, when you start in ministry, they're all just stats. He said, but the longer you stay around ministry, your friends become the statistics. And I think that's just really true. And hopefully, and by the way, that's Bible stuff. Many guys in the Bible didn't finish well. We can go through the Old Testament. But I think to the best of our ability, what I've learned is we want to go low. Go low. That's my kind of mantra right now is go low. Stay humble. Stay grounded. Stay serving. Stay accountable. Go low.
What does that mean? Like when you had some of your friends and mentors falls, so to speak, and make mistakes that were, just devastating for everybody involved. What did that do inside you?
I think that it has to scare the heck out of every person. It should scare all of us because woe is me.
Sobers me up.
Yeah, it sobers. It's just very sobering. It should never make you point a finger. It should never make you say how dare they. It should only put a mirror in front of you and go, what's wrong with me? What am I doing anything that could get me there? Because I'm a dude. One of my favorite verses right now, Jeremiah. Above all else, man, the heart is wicked. I'm a dude. I got a wicked. I could go down that road just as quick. And so, what do I need to do in my life to keep going and to maintain a soft spirit, submitted spirit, sharp mind, all the above, fill in the blank for whatever it could be, your vice, I don't care what it is. If it's got a hold of you, it could take you out.
So Preachers and Sneakers, I remember when that first became a thing a few years ago. You were in the Target, and I'm not a shoe guy. I think I have like $80 shoes on, so maybe I haven't been featured yet, but yeah, I'm wondering what that was like. If you could take us back to that, and what was that like being Chad Veach when Preachers and Sneakers points out what you're wearing on stage?
Yeah, I know. What I remember the most was it wasn't even on stage. What I remember the most vivid memory I have of that whole thing is like there was a photo of me like in my office, like eating like some French fries, if I remember right. I think I had McDonald's fries, if I'm not mistaken. But what I remember the most was this is going to sound morbid, but this is the truth. So my brother-in-law is in Palm Springs getting ready to preach his first ever sermon on a Sunday morning, studying by the pool. Wow. Goes in to get a drink, has a brain aneurysm. It's rushed to the hospital. My wife gets the call. We rush to Palm Springs. He dies. We're in the room praying. I mean, we are praying. I mean, I've never been in an environment like that. We get out of the room and I am in the kind of the waiting room area and we're kind of calming down. I check my phone and I see this thing, and I'm mad. I just lost my brother-in-law. So I comment back some. And then about 30, 45 minutes later, maybe an hour later or so, I go, don't respond. Only a fool looks like a fool if you respond to a fool. So I delete the comment. And I think, from what I remember, that's what made it go even more. He deleted the comment. He said this. That's kind of what I remember the most, is that I was in a hospital and I should have never responded. But I think overall, it's probably good that, we as a ministry group got called out of like, hey, are you wearing too much fancy stuff? And people just are turned off by the appearance of flashy, I think. And so I think there was some wisdom that needed to be applied. That's what I took away from it, is like, hey, you live in a fishbowl, bro, and you signed up for it. And John Maxwell, this is a good one. He says, the more responsibility you have, the less rights you have. So I can cry about it, but I don't have the right to cry about it. I'm a leader. So I got responsibility. And one of the responsibilities I have is, to the best of my ability, I can't please everybody, of course, but to the best of my ability, being sensitive that I could provoke people to jealousy or anger. And I got to live with a clean conscience on what I'm willing to do with that.
How do you respond to, I'm sure you get constantly criticized online. And as you said, if you've got a unique communication style, it's got its upside, but you also have your detractors who are like, I don't like that slow communication or fast communication or that style or whatever. How are you learning to process the external voices and have that make the internal dialogue better? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So that you're actually, because you're a student of leadership. You really are. I'm amazed when I see you, like, you read, you study. You're not just, oh yeah, this is easy. Like, you take your craft really seriously. But how are you processing those outside critical voices so it becomes enriching rather than debilitating or destructive?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, we have to be very careful. It's such an old cliche saying, right? Like, if we live by their praises, we'll die by their criticism. And that's a great saying until it confronts you and until you have to live with that. And I think getting canceled is it's a gift. One of our friends recently got canceled, and I was like, best thing that'll ever happen to you, get canceled. Because you probably, up to this point, not on purpose, we're living by the praises and thinking, I'm the grandpapa. But when you get canceled, you're like, oh no, that can also happen to me. I think this is why Jesus is like, hey, thanks for the praise, but like, I'm really good. Like, it says he wouldn't receive the praise of man. Why? Because he knew that what was in them. And what's in us? The ability to praise and the ability to cut. And so if we live by that, we're really I think you're gonna make moves to get praise, and that's gonna be the reaction that you garner and you get. And if I wanted to, I could manipulate my life to look so good, and I could garner praise. It's empty and it doesn't fill a void. And then when I get criticized, it's gonna crush me. I'll never forget the first book I actually released, not self-published, the first real one. My agent called me that morning, said, congratulations, just a heads up. On Amazon, people are going to tell you how much they love this book. You will not remember any of the positive comments, but there's going to be someone that gets on Amazon and says how awful this book was and how terrible of a writer you are. And that will be the only comment you remember. And that's just the power of the brain. The brain is so powerful, it keeps no record of success. It only keeps record of failure. And that is just the way we're wired. So I think we got to push back from receiving all this praise, because if you live off that, you're going to die when they turn against you. And they will. They cried out for Barabbas, guys. Like, they were like, we don't want the guy So if they're going to turn on Jesus, they're going to turn on you.
So how does that not become just I don't care what people think? Like being canceled is a good thing? Explore that a little bit more. I'm curious. That's a fresh line of thinking.
Well, I by the way, I think being canceled about things that are right and good and pure are okay. Let's not get canceled for dumb stuff.
Okay.
And
In other words, if you're hurting and abusing people, that's an appropriate cancellation.
Yeah, we should never do that again.
Okay, I'm glad we clarified that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also just side note, like I think we got to be careful because I feel like there's a lot of people that want virality and they want to go viral, and I would not go down that road. I don't want to go viral. Steady Eddie wins the race. Like just slow and steady. Just keep plodding. We don't need virality is a scary thing. And so be careful with that, I think.
Yeah, okay. So let's go back to where we were before when we were talking about sort of your rise to national significance in the church to the point where people are like, "Oh yeah, I know who Chad Veach is." Was there any part of that you were like, "Oh, this is going to be great," or you were orchestrating that? Because I look at, this podcast or my own platform, I'm always hoping more people listen.
Sure.
I'm grateful when more people listen. There's a little bit of a strategy there, but the results have greatly exceeded any effort I have put into it, if you know what I mean. So there's a sense that, I would be disingenuous to say I wasn't hoping that people would listen. And yet on the other hand, the minute you start taking that stuff too seriously, the end is near, right? Like you're in big trouble. So reconstruct your own journey and remember, we have a ton of young leaders listening. Chad's 42. He's not 32. So he didn't graduate from high school with Instagram. This happened in your 30s. Right. So I'm just curious with that pre-digital memory, like how much of that was intentional? How much of that was hoped for? Just break it down a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'm trying to even remember. I think I remember feeling really surprised, feeling really lucky, feeling really thankful. These were not things I didn't get this far in my dreams, and I'd never set out to do this stuff. I'll never forget. This is going back to the Brian Houston quote. I will never forget. So I'm in a small town called Puyallup, Washington, pastoring this youth group of we had 500 high schoolers showing up on a Sunday night, and it was this amazing time. And I'll never forget one day, I really felt God speak to me, and I felt like God said, "I want you to begin to network." And network to me was like a cuss word.
Yeah.
Like I grew up around church. I grew up around networkers, and I was like, network. Because I wasn't going to conferences. I wasn't attending anything. I wasn't trying to get into green rooms. I wasn't trying to meet anyone. I was just like, this is my lot. This is my life. And I'm loving it. And I really felt God say, for where I'm taking you, I want you to start to go out and meet guys. So I'll never forget. I bought some tickets, and I went to a big youth conference of 4,000. And one year I was there meeting them, and the next year I was there preaching. And it kind of happened like that. And once I preached on that platform, overnight, it felt like invitations happened. So I was surprised. I wasn't reaching. I wasn't praying. I wasn't maneuvering. Now, once things started happening, I started to realize I've got to make decisions. I've got to take a risk here because this feels like I'm on a path that's going to take me into something I've never seen modeled for me in my world. And I've got to so I remember I had to make the decision to stop my full-time job as a youth pastor to go on the road for 2 years because of the invitations that were coming in. But that was just because I felt like I'm going to start a church one day. I'm not ready to go do that. The road is really opening up. I really enjoy preaching at places, meeting the pastors, going to lunch afterwards, meeting people. I really love that whole experience. Let's do that for a while. So there wasn't a time where I was like, I think that I can, if I preach there, maybe it's it's the daily Bible reading in me that, it's slap the silly out of you if you try and get like that. And that's why I get very put off by people that are trying to leverage and monetize, leverage it. If you're in ministry and you're leveraging and monetizing, to me, you're missing out on the spirit of what all this is about.
Well, and the other thing that I think is different for, leaders in their 50s or older or 40s is you were doing something, you were communicating, and you saw this surge. Whereas I think it's easy to go online now and just say, no, I just want to go viral for the sake of going viral.
Right.
I did this dance, I did this thing, I did whatever, and now I'm big. But I think influence is best stewarded when it arises out of a life message, when it arises out of some blood, sweat, and tears. As my wife would say, it's a long road to success, or it's a overnight success is a long night. That's what she would say, and she would say it much better than I just said it. But anyway,
I like that.
Yeah, it's a long night.
True.
Mm-hmm. It's a long night. There were years and years of you doing nothing, and it's not like, oh, I pressed go on the strategy and the strategy took off. Yeah. How do you steward the level of influence that you have? How do you try to steward that right now?
Well, I think the old thought that I've tried to hold on to and regurgitate to our guys here is like the fastest way to lose influence is to not be aware of it. And I think the more self-awareness you have of your power, your influence, which again is supernatural, you can make tactical moves, which is just wisdom from God. But I think the sovereignty, I think we got to always add the ingredients of sovereignty in this stuff. God is the one that promotes. And if God wanted you to have a microphone, he'd give you a microphone. If he doesn't want you to have one, I don't think he's going to give you one. Like this is, it's like Samuel comes and he's like, the next king's here. And Jesse's like, oh, it's got to be this guy. And he's like, no, well, then it's got to be this guy. And it's the guy that God chose. I think God chooses people. And by the way, you and I can attest, there's smarter, more gifted, more talented people out there. But for whatever reason, promotion cometh not from the east nor the west. It just, God promotes. So I think that with influence, you need to be very aware of how powerful you are. How, sometimes some of our guys will say, a couple of years ago, you said this to me. And I go, I said, what? Yeah, you said, no. They remember. They think about. That could live rent-free in somebody's head. So I think the quickest way to lose your influence is not to realize how much you have. You have more people watching you and looking to your life and listening to your words. And there's a power behind you. And I think that with influence, now I don't have all the influence in the world, but guess what? It's my influence that I'm thankful for. And to the best of my ability, I will steward it. But stewardship to me, like what you're saying, is not just taking care of what I've got. It is also trying to turn 5 into 10. And so there's a tension there. How do I turn 5 into 10? Well, the better I am at my craft and the more people I want to reach. And if my motives are right in that. And so I think that it's never just like, this is my lot. It has to be like what God was saying, like, no, there's more, and do what you can do to be a good influence and manage well what you got.
No, that is really good advice. And I think it applies whether you're stewarding 50 people, 500, 5,000, or 500,000. It's the same thing, right? You have that influence. Okay, as we wrap up, I want to ask you, what are you focused on right now? What are you thinking about? What gets you excited? What gets you worried? What are you focused on?
I'm most excited about the opportunity of reaching people that don't know who God is. That gets me the most excited. Like I think about a guy down the street in Riverside named Greg Laurie, and I'm kind of looking at him going like, he's winning. I don't got a lot of friends laying around that fill up a stadium 3 to 4 nights a year and see thousands and thousands of people come to Jesus that probably wouldn't have said yes. So I get excited about people that don't know hope, don't know love, don't know that there's a God that's obsessed with them. They have no idea of the love, the acceptance, and forgiveness that is found in Christ. So I get most excited about the opportunity of evangelism. I would say that probably gets me the most excited. And in saying that, that gets me excited to raise up a bunch of guys and gals that want to go do the work and want to go flip the world upside down and want to go tell people about this amazing message we have and this amazing guy that we serve. So that's what I'm thinking about, is how do we reach people that nobody's reaching? And then how do you raise up effective, confident, courageous leaders that can go and think about Jesus. He's like, you guys go, you two, you go there, you two go there, you two, all my authority I give to you. And so at this part of my life, I think it was, what's his name at Bayside? Ray. He said,
Ray Johnson.
Ray Johnson says, you got to ask yourself, do you want to have a platform or do you want to be a platform? And at this part of my life, I'm saying, God, make me a platform where I can send guys out and raise them up, and men and women that would look and go, wow, the harvest is plentiful, and we're excited to go reach it.
But by that, do you mean like a platform for other people to stand on, for other people to get their start on? Yeah. Yes. Ray has embodied that so well. I've got to have him on the podcast at some point. I've had his daughter on, or she will be on soon, but I got to have Ray on. And, I think, by the way, Brad Lomenick is listening. We are both friends of Brad Lomenick. That is supposed to be his next book. So about twice a year, I just remind him he's got to write that book.
I love Brad so much. And Brad, we're done with the 3 H's. Let's get the new book going.
Yeah. Come on, Brad. Time to do that. All right. Chad, you've got a bunch of books out there, I guess. And tell us where people can find you online these days and your latest.
Yeah. Our church website is just zoechurch.org. And then I have one under my name, chadveach.org, and just came out with a new book on prayer. And I'm really excited about it. It's kind of a big passion project that I'm really wanting everyone. I just can't imagine where you and I would be without prayer. So want everybody to learn what prayer is and what prayer is not and how to do it. And so I'm really excited about this book.
And what's the book called?
It's called Worried About Everything Because I Pray About Nothing.
That's a great line.
Just a play on Philippians 4, 6 and 7, be anxious in nothing.
That's awesome. Chad, it's been a joy to have this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on.
It's a completely different experience when you see it face to face. Being able to see how a child and how families are taken care of through what happens within the context of the local church, and seeing how compassion comes alongside local churches to empower them to make a difference.
One of the significant things that compassion has done in the life of our church is inspire people to understand that the gospel, the real gospel, requires justice and it requires mercy.
Our partnership with Compassion International has just taken our external focus to a new level as a church, which I felt God wanted us to have. And there is an energy in our congregation about making a difference on the other side of the world.
At the end of the day, I'm a local church guy. I think it's one of Compassion's distinctives is all of their work is done through the local church on the ground.
As you come close to people in the global world, God will teach you things about yourself that you would have never otherwise learned. And so it's beautiful to be able to come alongside Compassion so that you can grow in your view and your perspective of God.
I see Compassion as an on-ramp, and it's really given us the opportunity to share the importance of sharing with others. It's really increasing our capacity as an entire church to love and to look beyond our own selves and to see the needs of others.
I look at Compassion as a real gift to how we could really shape and impact the heart of our congregation to be more in alignment with the heart of God.
This is a great partnership. It's a great tool that helps get people to join in something that's building the kingdom of God.
Our partnership with Compassion, it really allows us to see and do what the Bible calls us to do. And that's what we want at the end.